He was a night guard at the old city archive. All he had to do was walk the halls, check the doors, and log everything. But from his very first steps, something felt wrong. The flickering lights reflected off all the glass surfaces, and the silence was so thick he could hear himself breathe. Then he heard it again, soft, distinct tapping. At first he thought it was the wind, but then he realized that the sound was coming from behind a closed door. It was regular, almost like someone counting steps. He approached the door. The air suddenly grew heavy, as if the walls themselves were pressing down on his chest. What was it about this place? Why did it feel like the entire building was watching him? He knew it was irrational, but he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Still, curiosity got the better of him, and he slowly opened the door. He stepped into a dark corridor. He had never seen it before. How could he have never seen it before? He had patrolled these halls countless times. It didn't make any sense. The new corridor stretched endlessly into the darkness ahead of him. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the smell of damp mold filled his nostrils. Then he heard it again. Footsteps, soft moans, taps on the floor. He wanted to run back, but the door had vanished. It had simply dissolved into the wall, leaving him trapped in the darkness. His heart pounded in his chest. His breath came in short gasps, and behind him, a whisper hissed, "You are here forever." He hurried forward, but the corridor shifted around him. Floors creaked, walls contracted, and shadows moved independently, taking shapes that made his blood run cold. He saw figures of people he knew, but their faces were twisted in horror. He tried to call out, but his voice caught in his throat. The figures reached out, then dissolved into the darkness, leaving only whispers in their wake. "You can't hide," they whispered. "There is no escape." Their words echoed around him, bouncing off the walls and seeping into his bones. He stumbled on, desperate to find an exit, a way out of this nightmare. But the corridor seemed to stretch on forever, taunting him with its endless darkness. Then he saw it, a staircase leading down into the darkness. Maybe it would lead to a basement, a window, anything that could get him out of here. He descended slowly, each step creaking ominously under his weight. The stairs seemed to go on forever, and when he finally reached the bottom, he found himself in a vast empty basement. The ceiling was lost in the darkness above him. The air was stale and heavy, and the only sound was the drip, drip, drip of water somewhere far off. The stones under his feet were cold and hard, and as he walked over them, they sounded like muffled heartbeats. A sudden movement in the corner of his eye made him jump. He spun around, but there was nothing there. Only the whisper, "You will not leave." Panic surged through him, hot and suffocating. He ran, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. In the corners, he saw figures flash, eyes glowing red. The walls seemed to tighten around him, pressing in with every step he took. He didn't know how long he ran, but finally, just as he was near collapse from terror, a last door appeared in the distance. Hope surged through him. He didn't know where it led, but anywhere was better than this suffocating darkness. He ran toward it, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached the door and pushed it open. It was ajar. He stepped through and found himself outside in the bright morning light. Relief washed over him. He had escaped the darkness, but as he turned to go back into the building, he noticed that the door had vanished. It was as if it had never been there at all. He looked at his hands, then at the building. Was it real, or had he imagined it all? He couldn't be sure. But as he hurried away, he felt a cold touch on his wrist, and a small handprint was left on his skin. It was a print that could not have been made by anyone he knew, a mark left by a presence he had never seen. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Marcus tried to shake off the events of the night before. He told himself it was just a dream, a figment of his imagination. But the small handprint on his wrist was a constant reminder of what he had experienced. He went about his day, trying to focus on his work, but his mind kept returning to the mysterious door and the terrifying whispers that echoed in his ears. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was watching him, waiting for him to return. Days turned into weeks, but Marcus couldn't escape the memory of the door. He found himself constantly checking his watch, making sure he wasn't late for his shift at the archive. He knew he should call the police, tell them about the whispering voices and the handprints on his arm, but he was afraid they wouldn't believe him. The night before his shift, he couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his bed, listening to the wind howling outside. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves sent shivers down his spine. He got up, unable to take it anymore. He had to do something, anything, to distract himself from the thoughts that were driving him crazy. He poured himself a glass of water and went to his desk. As he sat down, his eyes fell on a book about local history. He opened it at random and began to read. He didn't know much about the history of his city, and as he delved deeper into its pages, he discovered a lot of stories that he had never heard before. He learned about the old city archive, the very building where he worked as a night guard. It was built in the early 19th century, a time when the city was rapidly expanding. The archive was supposed to be a repository of all the important documents of the city, a place where the past was carefully preserved. But as the years went by, the archive became more than just a building. It became a living entity, a creature that thrived on the fear and despair of its visitors. People began to whisper that the archive was cursed, that it was haunted by the ghosts of those whose lives it had consumed. He read about the people who had worked in the archive, the librarians and archivists who had dedicated their lives to preserving the past. He learned about the secrets they had kept, the lies they had told, and the darkness that had consumed them. He learned about the whispers that had haunted the archive for years, whispers that had driven people to madness and despair. And then he read about the handprints, the strange markings that had appeared on the walls and doors, markings that were said to be the touch of the archive itself. He closed the book with a shudder. He had never heard these stories before. He had never heard the archive referred to as a living entity, a creature that fed on fear. He felt a chill run down his spine. He knew he couldn't ignore what he had read. He had to do something, anything to break the curse that had been cast over the archive. He just didn't know what that something was. The next night, when he arrived at the archive, he was more prepared than ever. He brought a camera with him, hoping to capture the whispers or the handprints on camera. He also brought a priest, someone who could help him fight the darkness that had consumed the archive. But as soon as he stepped inside, he knew he was in trouble. The whispers were louder, the handprints more numerous, and the darkness seemed to be closing in on him. He and the priest walked the halls trying to find the source of the whispers, trying to break the curse that had been cast over the archive. But the darkness was too strong, the whispers were too loud, and the priest too scared. As they fled the archive that night, they realized they had been played. The darkness had used them, had lured them into its trap. The archive was too powerful. The curse was too strong, and now they were trapped in its clutches. Marcus looked at his wrist at the small handprint that was still there. He knew he wasn't dreaming. He knew what he had experienced was real. He also knew that he wasn't safe. The archive was waiting for him, whispering his name, calling him back to its dark embrace. And as the sun set on the horizon, he knew he had only one choice. He had to face the archive, had to confront the whispers and break the curse that had been cast over it, or he would be trapped in its darkness forever. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe because even more terrifying tales are coming soon.